Hello, everyone. Welcome to another day of the Internet Measurement Village. Joining us today, we're so happy to have Shens and Rodrigue from TunnelBear, that are also known by their bear names, Pooh Bear or Paddle Bear. And they'll be telling us all about circumventing internet censorship with TunnelBear. Thanks for joining us, James and Rod.
Thank you, Arturo. Hi, everybody. I hope you're all keeping well during these strange and unique times. It's such a pleasure to be here with you all today. I'm Shems, and I work on community and advocacy efforts on the TunnelBear Anti-Censorship Initiative. My colleague Rod is here with us too.
Hello, I'm Rod. I started at TunnelBear in 2013. I first built the Windows app and then helped build the Mac app and iOS and worked a little bit on Android. The browser extension, backend, and infrastructure like VPN servers, etc. And since I managed the Remember team, and now I manage the VPN group, so we're responsible for a VPN connection from A to Z for TunnelBear.
Awesome. We've both been watching the presentations over the past few weeks, so we'd like to take a second to thank Arturo and the entire Uni team. This has been so awesome. And it's such a privilege to be in such experienced and passionate company. What we are going to be talking about today is TunnelBear's dedicated anti-censorship initiative, which kicked off earlier this year. A lot of you may know TunnelBear's VPN product, but we're really excited to talk to you today about how we've taken all the lessons learned from years of anti-censorship advocacy to launch this program in 2020. So first, I'd like to go into a little bit about us. TunnelBear is all about mission-driven development. Our co-founders, Ryan and Daniel, started TunnelBear with this idea that internet privacy should be simple. This idea came from their belief that the internet should be for everybody, that security tools should be accessible even to those of us who may not be as technical. This is the reason behind the Friendly Bear. And if you visit our site, you'll see the no-nonsense pros and a really simple to understand privacy policy, which we're really proud of. So in essence, we really believe the internet is a better place when everyone can browse privately, browse the same internet as everybody else, or in other words, much more relevant here, we believe in an open and uncensored internet for everyone. As part of our commitment to this global mission, TunnelBear is available in 12 different languages. We're grateful to the efforts of groups like Localization Lab in helping make TunnelBear more accessible, and we're actively working on more localization efforts as well. As it stands, TunnelBear currently has 3 apps. The first is our most well-known offering. This is the main TunnelBear app. This is our VPN service, and it's the core focus of our anti-censorship work. Next is Remember, which is an easy-to-use encrypted password manager. Again, we see this theme of simple yet robust privacy. And lastly, we have TunnelBear for Teams. This product is a VPN suited to companies or organizations who may want to manage their office's VPN accounts through an admin portal, just kind of keep everything in one place. So throughout the years, as we've been developing these apps, in keeping with our mission, we've also been involved in several instances of censorship crisis response. So how does TunnelBear bypass censorship? Well, in like the most basic sense, VPN allows users in censored countries to connect to a server in a more permissive country, which allows them to browse the web freely. On our VPN service uses a mix of protocols and encryption technology to get around censors in restrictive countries, which Rod will expand on in a bit. Our anti-censorship program is really about investing in anti-censorship technologies so we can better help those living under restrictive conditions. We launched our first formal anti-censorship initiative this year, as said before, but we did this in order to better understand the nuances of censorship. It's noteworthy here that the formation of this program was inspired by years of TunnelBear anti-censorship crisis response. So here we see a timeline which briefly lays out a few of these crisis response instances. We began this work in 2013 with the Turkey Gezi protests, and then there was a similar blockage event with the Venezuela protests. We were then referenced during the Uganda election in 2016, and lastly, the Iran protests of early 2018. We will dive deeper into these events in a bit, but I think it's important to note that these experiences are really what taught us about the technical and coordination work involved in anti-censorship, and they've really humbled us over the years and taught us a lot. So I'll now hand it over to Rod, who will be diving into more of our anti-censorship efforts.
Thank you, Shams. Before I dive into the censorship discussion itself, I want to first talk about our commitment to security and transparency, as that drives a lot of our work. TunnelBear was the first VPN company to conduct third-party audits of our infrastructure. This includes VPN server code, our backend code, and lastly, to check that there's no security vulnerabilities in our infrastructure. We believe this is a crucial part of our development lifecycle. If there are any vulnerabilities found, and they're always published online, we deal with it right then and there. And we now conduct these audits annually. We also do an annual transparency report. Our thought process around transparency and privacy is pretty simple. 1, let's not collect any data. 2, if we absolutely need to collect data, we should collect the minimum amount possible to accomplish the service requirement. 3, if the data is collected, we will always be transparent about it so customers can clearly understand how we operate our service. The above 2 are values we've carried throughout our anti-censorship efforts. Same goes for data analytics. These same values apply to our data roadmap. With regard to data analytics, for example, necessary to run our network, we have yet to find a robust analytics platform that suits our privacy standards well enough, so we built our own. In order to run a network, we need to track connection failures, what protocols work in certain countries, and so on. It's crucial here that we don't track any of the data back to the user, and so we maintain our own ETL pipeline, which would be uncommon in organizations our size. For example, today we're around like 50 to 60 people. In keeping with the theme of anonymity, we have always been advocates of stronger encryption. Advanced encryption really is vital to adopt when advocating for digital rights. And we believe that even if performance may take a hit, hopefully not, but even if, security through better encryption is our absolute priority. Today, we are looking into taking advantage of some of the sweet new privacy features TLS 1.3 brings us. A quick note here that we are transparent about the technology we use and have you can find on our blog post all around. You can find on our blog post things like what protocols we use for VPN, what we use for authentication, etc. And expect more from us in the future, specifically potentially maybe stuff around TLS 1.3. And so with these values in mind, I'll start talking about censorship. We have identified a framework for measuring censorship and developing anti-censorship technologies, which has 4 key stages. And this is really how we structured the bulk of our initiative. The first stage is distribution. This means either TunnelBear.com is blocked, or the app isn't available on the Play Store, or the Play Store itself is not accessible, etc. The second stage is reaching TunnelBear APIs. Here we're talking about being able to create an account or getting the list of available VPN servers. The third stage is actually connecting to a VPN. Here, censorship happens when censors block a particular port or a particular protocol. The final stage is maintaining a VPN connection. Here, we're potentially talking about active probing, where a censor sees that connection has been long-lived to a specific IP, and then they decide to test the IP and realize, oh, this is a VPN server, at which point they'll potentially throttle the connection or just render it unusable. We've been focused on each of these 4 stages and building out our anti-censorship efforts, and we've been tackling each stage. We started tackling each stage this year. Here are a few examples of how we're tackling these stages. So regarding distribution, today in Iran, you can't get the TunnelBear app through the Play Store. However, we've been working with an organization called ASL19, and today TunnelBear is available in their own app store called Feskuche in Farsi. Though I should note that we are still in testing phase of this distribution model and still testing how to roll out TunnelBear in advanced censorship environments. Regarding reaching TunnelBear's APIs, We do things like domain fronting, where we use cloud services like Google or AWS to proxy traffic to our domains. Next, to connect and maintain a secure VPN connection, we use OPS4, which is a technology that makes encrypted traffic look like normal traffic, like random normal traffic. As mentioned earlier, we had to build our own data analytics platform in order to have non-PEI telemetry. For example, we need to measure which types of connections, protocols, or even VPN servers IP works, even IPs that work or don't work, which are crucial to understanding if censorship is happening in a certain region, and it's crucial that it's never linked back to a user. Each component of our infrastructure isn't aware of the other side. For example, when you want to connect to a VPN server, you get a temporary token used to authenticate to the VPN server. However, the VPN server itself doesn't know who that token belongs to. And that token disappears as well after a couple of days. It's the same for our telemetry. We can't link back to a user, and we don't want any, and we don't use any device IDs. We don't want them as well. That could be, we don't want to be able to link any data on our side with third-party data. And again, we'll never ever log anyways any browsing behavior or history. Speaking of telemetry, we also wrote that connection failure prompts. These are localized notifications that pop up when a connection fails in a potentially censored network, and give the user a choice whether they want to send to our anti-censorship team bug reports plus some context around where the failure is and what type of failure it is. The prompt also asks users to identify the type of failure they're experiencing, which is sometimes something harder to see in diagnostics or logs. So an example, did the connection fail without being able to connect? Did the VPN connection take a long time to fail? Was the VPN connection working and then it failed, etc. So these prompts have already helped us identify some trends that we weren't necessarily aware of. For example, in certain censored countries, we know that different censorship techniques are applied through different networks, ISPs, within the same country sometimes. So crucially, this is another way we respect privacy while trying to collect data that would help us diagnose issues. As we all know, censorship happens everywhere. And as we've seen on the timeline, we've dealt with many censorship events in the past, and we learned something with each one that improved our processes. In 2013, the Turkish government blocked social media. There was a ton of coverage on the Gezi Park protest. Let me give you some context in 2013 where we're at. We had around 3,000 daily users. We had far less than 1 million users in total. What started happening is that we were sitting around the office on a Friday night, and all of a sudden, we started getting pinged on Twitter by people in Turkey. We saw all these tweets come flying in. Most of them were in Turkish. We were doing our best to try and Google Translate to try and figure out this stuff on the fly. We then figured out what was happening on the ground, and we made the snap decision to provide free data to everyone in Turkey. The response was overwhelming. We went from 3,000 daily users, around 3,000 daily users, to 45,000 daily users overnight. The next day, we had to go through the process of amplifying these efforts, and we had to rush to find a Turkish translator. That Turkish translator actually ended up being an actual TunnelBear user for a while. We ended up rushing to trying to figure out how to get our blog translated, our tweet translated, and what the offering was going to be long term. Specifically because we were a very young company at that point. In terms of censorship, remember our 4 stages? This event had to do with the distribution censorship stage. At that point, TunnelBear wasn't accessible anymore on the Play Store. At that point as well, we learned giving unlimited bandwidth is pretty costly for a small company. After social media has been restored in Turkey, we had to think about how to shut this off, given the fact that our business was so small back then. We ended up reducing our fee by 60% for Turkish users. It became clear to us because of the situation that the data was needed a lot longer than a few weeks. So that's the background why we ended up reducing our fee to 60% for Turkish users. This event really highlighted the need for TunnelBear in these situations. Also, in 2014, the During the spring Venezuela protests, which lasted a few months, we saw similar issues as Turkey. Social media was blocked. We saw a need from netizens in Venezuela for secure bandwidth, and so we gave away free bandwidth. Notably, Nicolas Maduro called us out on TV for doing this, and we often joke in the office that you haven't made it in the world until a dictator calls out your app. Anyways, what was unique about this instance is that the Venezuelan government then asked internet service providers to block TunnelBear, which means our APIs were censored. This was a new challenge for us because in the early days, there was just DNS level blocking. Countries weren't really blocking VPNs, just access. A lot of people were using Google's DNS to get around access issues. There were even campaigns where people would spray paint 1.1.1.1 around to get to let people know that you can get around the censorship. We then engaged in this cat and mouse game, which, when you think of it, is our first big anti-censorship effort. As opposed to simply giving out free data, within 24 hours of being blocked in Venezuela, TunnelBear created another website called Tunneloso, which is TunnelBear but in Spanish. This served as an alternative website where netizens in Venezuela can download our app. Actually, funnily enough, this website still exists today, but if I'm not mistaken, it has a lot of our older branding, so I wouldn't recommend going there for TunnelBear apps. Venezuela was followed by not so well publicized, but consistent blocks by the UAE and other Gulf countries, where we were getting blocked a lot and having trouble to keeping our service up. Again, the cat and mouse game was a big part of figuring out how to stay online in UAE. It was so rigorous that because we're 12 hours behind the UAE, we'd be doing something during the day to unblock ourselves, and then next day, literally 12 hours later, we'd be blocked again. This is around the time we started working on domain fronting. So the third example we have for you here is of Iran. In early 2018, during the Iran protest, we gave out 2 gigabytes of data to everyone in Iran. If you recall back to our 4 stages of censorship, Iran is the first time we encountered all of them in one country. So all these 4 stages, we're talking about connecting to a VPN server, we're talking about maintaining a VPN connection, etc. We're talking about deep packet inspection, we're potentially talking about active probing. So this is when we learned that they do cyber censorship on a whole other levels. Essentially, we were a small mouse and they were a very big cat. Because of the roadblocks presented during the Iran event, we realized our more reactive efforts weren't enough, and we saw a need for a more proactive anti-censorship approach. Finally, we attached a few examples here in 2016. I'm mentioning these not to highlight more massive anti-censorship campaigns, but to draw attention to the social impact and social responsibility of technology. In 2016, the Brazilian government blocked WhatsApp in the middle of an election, not dissimilar to what we saw in Burundi just a few months ago. As we all know, social media blockages during such a critical time for democracy are hugely problematic, as they discourage citizens from participating in their civic duty and having an open conversation about what's going on. When this happened in Brazil, TunnelBear saw 1 million users overnight. This was a huge spike for us, at 10% increase in usage at that time. So we really had to hustle to make sure everything went smoothly given all our new users. Last but not least, we have Uganda. This instance was also during an election campaign. The government had ordered the mobile service providers to block social media platforms, claiming that they caused unnecessary chaos. During this time, a presidential candidate took to Twitter and started calling out that TunnelBear was the easiest way to get free information. These events have been huge wake-up calls for us. Our technical product has an important and widespread social impact. Our main lesson here is that we need to work with organizations to anticipate these blockages in order to help out as much as possible. I'll now hand it back to Shems, who will talk about the proactive approach.
Thank you, Rod. So a really big part of our new approach is to engage with partners on the ground. We're well aware that those who really experience censorship are those who better understand the nuances of it, including the on-the-ground roadblocks we may not foresee ourselves. It's been really great over the past few months since we launched this initiative to connect with grassroots organizations working in this space, some of whom are here today. And they've really shed light on how censorship is legislated. So once we understand that, we can better anticipate any technical challenges that may be coming our way. I heard someone say a few weeks ago as part of the Internet Measurement Village that censorship has social, political, and economic dimensions. This is the foundation of our community approach. So that really hit home with me. We're mindful that reacting to censorship events in a respectful and appropriate way means doing our very best with the help of local experts to understand all three of these dimensions and how they interact. I also think I heard a few presenters over the past few weeks talk about the idea of coordination, the idea that so many of us in this space are doing similar work, yet we need to coordinate to make sure we're impacting the lives of those on the ground experiencing censorship as positively as possible. So I encourage anyone who's measuring censorship, interested in advanced encryption, and so on, to reach out to us on community@tunnelbear.com. I want to take a second here to note that this anti-censorship program is really about our social responsibility, especially as a tech company that's committed to an internet that works for everyone. We spoke earlier about mission-driven development, and this program is honestly, it's that censorship, it's that sentence in action. We're committed at TunnelBear to investing in the human impact of our technical roadmap. So yeah, we really want to thank you for bearing with us today. The TunnelBear team is open to learn, we're open to collaborate, and we're really excited about this program. Again, if you'd like to reach out and get involved, please email at community@tunnelbear.com. So yeah, that's all we really had prepared for you guys today. We wanted to leave some time for Q&A. Again, I want to thank Maria and Arturo for having us and the entire UNI team. Rod and I will be here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Shams and Rodrigue, for that really interesting presentation. I would like to remind everybody who's watching this video live that you can leave questions for Shams and Rodrigue. The link, you see it on the screen now. There's a pad set up, but you can also just leave questions in the YouTube chat below. Yeah, I'll start now from reading the first question that we have received, which comes from David F. And the question is, you mentioned Pas Couché for distribution in Iran, the App Store sort of alternative market. Is there any workaround for Apple's removal of VPN apps in its App Store?
So today we're still evaluating all other alternatives. I can't speak to much more than that. But on iOS, you definitely know it's a lot harder than Android to kind of like have these alternative app stores.
Okay. Well, I guess also more broadly speaking, if maybe you can. Like, what sort of strategies do you adopt to distribute TunnelBear in censored regions? Like, what what strategies do you use for that?
Yeah. So when I can talk about what we've thought about, and I can talk about a little bit of the thought process of what we thought about and what we can't do today for specific reasons. I won't talk about kind of what lays out in the next 2-3 months, because that will come and we'll announce it in proper time. Just we still need to test things properly and go through everything we need to go through internally as well. So the things that we've thought through and we don't do today is the obvious one, which is, for example, sending the APK by email, sending the manual file by email. We don't do that today because we don't want to, and we might be wrong about this. I'm super open to hearing everyone's thoughts. We don't want to open up, we don't want our users to have this reflex of downloading, sideloading an APK and downloading it without really knowing where it's coming from and where the source is. We've seen instances like in Lebanon, for example, where a fake WhatsApp app that looks like WhatsApp, behaves like WhatsApp, is actually WhatsApp, but has malware in it. just go through like expand very quickly. So we because this reflex of just downloading an APK is a simple one to adopt. So that's the main reason why we're not doing distribution kind of like directly by email or things like that today. But it doesn't mean that we won't do it in the future. It just means that we're thinking about these things in a way that's that wouldn't put our users in danger in general.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's definitely a really important point of not training or teaching users some really bad security practices, and thinking about that in also how we inform circumvention strategies. That's a good point. We have another question that comes from Maria, and she asks, what's been an interesting distinction in censorship strategies in different countries?
It's interesting to see. It's interesting to see how advanced some countries are, even though they might be smaller, or you would not have as a default reflex, oh, this country needs censorship or anything. This country has a valid censorship motivation behind it, or something like that. It's interesting to see how advanced some of these smaller countries can get. I'm trying to see if there's an example. For example, in Iran in 2018, actually in Iran recently, they've gone through an even more advanced step, which is just shutting down the internet. And at that point, we can't do anything. So I do hope that that's not the default reflex going forward in the future. Also, actually, you know what? Sorry, I didn't answer your question about the different types of censorship. Was that originally the question? Technical different types of censorship happening today? Was that the question?
I guess the question was perhaps like, what's been what have you noticed in terms of censorship strategies that apply to different countries around the world, and if you've noticed any interesting difference or distinction in patterns by which censorship is implemented in countries where you have TunnelBear users.
So to answer the question, again, back to our 4 stages, the most basic one, and we've seen that that's kind of the first step countries adopt. That's the pattern. We always see this. At first, it's removing TunnelBear from the Play Store. It's actually asking Google to remove TunnelBear from the Play Store. The second pattern is actually the second pattern that we see always is just blocking the TunnelBear.com website. More advanced than that, we haven't seen a specific pattern where it starts in one country or in one network and then just everywhere. Those first 2 are the main ones that we see kind of like within a country, where it starts with that, and then we know reaching our APIs is the next step. The third and fourth stage of censorship we haven't seen as a pattern in general. We've seen it in specific countries like Iran and others, but it's not a pattern where it's like one country does it and then everyone else does it.
Okay, great. Thanks for sharing that. So we have another question coming from Simone, and he asks, is there a TunnelBear library that can be embedded into third-party mobile apps to implement circumvention for a single app?
It's a great idea. Today there isn't. I can only say that today there isn't, but it's a great idea, and we do hope that within the anti-censorship team we start doing more open source things as well.
Nice. So another question comes from Leonid, and his question is, were you already using OBS4 during the Iranian incident back in 2018, when TunnelBear was blocked at all 4 steps from distribution to maintaining a VPN connection? If yes, was it blocked back then?
Yes, we were using OBS4. Iran is one of those countries where censorship is different per network, and as far as I can tell today, it wasn't OPS4 wasn't blocked at that point.
Okay, that's interesting. Then we have another question coming from Maria. She asks, can you expand on potential challenges you have encountered during the Turkey, Iran, Burundi free bandwidth events, to say how this informed your current strategies?
Yes, I think the main one when talking about Turkey, for example, and Venezuela, which is different, basically just the sheer population number of Venezuela and Turkey is very different. Is very different than Burundi, for example. So at that point, we had to deal. We were a very small company, and we had to deal with network loads that we've never seen before, and so we had to work a lot on just getting more servers up there, ramping up our service, ramping up our services, and even potentially and even reducing the load, basically reducing our capabilities in certain things. So for example, today we have levers that enable us to, let's say we have a higher load, we can kind of disable some things that would enable us to even have a higher capacity. So to give you a small example, where for example, our VPN servers would check in with our backend from time to time. Basically, we can say, okay, check in less often. So that's an example of reducing some of those check-ins to enable more people to connect to our services without having any issues. Versus Burundi, for example, where it's more of it's a smaller country where it's more, and today we're capable of handling that capacity, where we it's more of a decision. Oh, okay, social media is blocked, then we need to do something specific, and for how long we do it, it's more kind of like conversational decisions versus technical ones. Actually, one more thing is a lot of the censorship events inspired a lot of the features that we have today. So for example, when you go on TunnelBear and choose the dropdown, instead of picking a country, if you choose fastest, that enables us to load balance you appropriately to the servers that we believe are not overloaded at that point in time. So if there's a censorship event happening in a certain country, then fastest might connect you, will connect you to a different IP, even if you're coming from the same network, for example.
Great, thanks for sharing that insight. We have another question coming from Hussein, and he asks, when did you start using encrypted SNI? I'm aware that in several ISPs in Iran, which have a majority of users, they completely blocked all client hellos that have ESNI.
So today in Android, we do these ESNI tests. So we're still evaluating, basically, whether or not we're still evaluating. We're measuring here at that point whether ESNI would be beneficial in certain networks. So we're not using it. We're not using it more than that evaluation at this point in time. I can't say more than that, to be honest.
Okay, fair enough. So we have another question coming from Maria.
Mm-hmm.
And she asks, can you please tell us a bit more about your partnership program? How do you collaborate with local partners? How can local organizations support TunnelBear and vice versa?
Yeah, I can speak a bit to that. So it's been really interesting talking to people because some people have, as I said, that local context of the kind of help they need, and it can inform whether we need to do a more long-term program or like short-term giving free bandwidth or stuff like that. So it's just understanding that context, as I said before. working with local partners also, a lot of them have those excellent relationships with those on the ground doing like the real hard work, like human rights defenders and digital rights defenders and activists. And it's been really great to work with them. So it's more of like a collaborative effort to understand how we can get technologies to the people who need them most, and also understanding what the need is on the ground, as I said before, with all of these organizations and communities. So yeah, we've been speaking with a lot of really awesome people in this community over the past few months, and yeah, we're just keen for more discussion.
Nice, thanks. And are there some specific things that you think local organizations could do to support TunnelBear, or like ways to get involved, be engaged with you all?
I suppose so. I suppose we've spoken with really awesome people like the Keep It On Coalition, who do a lot of awesome tracking about when election campaigns happen and when help might be necessary. So if other organizations can think of ways that TunnelBear can benefit them from a technical perspective and so on, then we're definitely happy to get involved.
Nice, thanks. And we'll leave contact information and ways in which people can follow up in the video description below. And I think Maria also has shared some links in the live chat, so check those out.
That's awesome. Thank you.
So we have another question coming from Simone. He asks, I'm a user in a country. How does TunnelBear choose the right VPN server to use, given that I am in such a country?
Great question. So if you choose a specific country, then we will just route you to the least busy server in that country, basically. However, if you choose the fastest option, today, depending on the platform, it might either ping a few IPs. You'll always get kind of like a list of IPs, but the client might ping a few IPs and see which one responds first in a way. So other clients might try different protocols and see which one connects first, and then some of the platforms, I mean, and then sometimes it's just the server deciding, please connect to this IP because I know everyone else is, let's say, everyone else is busy.
Cool. I guess I have a follow-up question as well related to this somehow. You mentioned on one of the slides that there was that you had some system where you would detect if there's a connection failure, as in for some reason you're not able to establish a VPN connection, and you showed how there's this prompt pop-up that appears, and you have the user report somehow some information about how the failure happened. I was wondering what techniques you're using to send back those bug reports, like how it's being sent back to you.
Yes. So this is where domain fronting plays a role. And this is the type of thing that will keep evolving and basically hope that it's not censored fast enough. Yeah, so we end up sending that information through domain fronting. One of the things that this helps us do is because we don't automatically send, for example, your diagnostic logs, your diagnostics. So for example, kind of like OpenVPN specific errors might show up there that we don't automatically send. We prefer that the user has the choice to send them. So that it's why we think that prompt is important for our users, and to solve that in case, let's say TunnelBear, if TunnelBear didn't work in itself, you wouldn't get to that pop-up stage. So we know at that point that you're able to at least log in, so at least you can reach our APIs, that second stage of censorship, basically.
Great, cool. Thanks for sharing that. That's and I guess the idea that you don't use domain fronting for everything is that it's very expensive. So
yes.
Fair enough. So I see a comment from IRC in response to the initial one of the first questions, which was related to iOS app distribution. And it's mentioned how in this talk from WWDAAC.
WWDC?
Maybe it's the Worldwide Apple Developers Conference?
Yeah, WWDC.
They mentioned progressive web apps as a potential for iOS distribution, but it's not powerful enough for a VPN app.
Yes, so you would need specific permissions to enable VPN. However, today, just to bring into context, most in censored countries, most of our users are actually Android users. So this is where a lot of our focus is today versus kind of like thinking about iOS for distribution. So just keeping that in mind, basically that's one of the reasons why we focus so much on Android.
Right. And in relation to the ESNI thing, there was also some comments being shared where DCF was mentioning that he hadn't heard about ESNI blocking in Iran, asking for public information about it, and then sharing a Cloudflare blog post that talks about it, and Hossein then following up that, saying that he tested it manually using several ISPs using the Cloudflare website, where Cloudflare has this tool that you can use to test for encrypted SNI. And the conference is not the Worldwide Developer Conference. It's actually the Worldwide Developers Against Apple Censorship.
Oh, okay. Oh, thank you. Yeah.
So just important to clarify that. That's a very good point. Thanks for those comments on IRC. So we have, in the meantime, some other questions coming in. I see you have forked a WireGuard implementation in user space by Cloudflare in your GitHub organization. Are you using it in production, or is it experimental? Asking because, if I recall correctly, you were using OpenVPN in the past.
Yes, we do use OpenVPN. OpenVPN is our main one, specifically in censorship countries. WireGuard today is just experimental testing. We haven't, like everything we do, we wouldn't roll out the protocol without properly auditing, testing and specifically auditing for privacy reasons. So today is just testing.
Okay, thanks. So we have another question coming from Tara. The question is, considering the APK issue, have you seen TunnelBear APKs being distributed unofficially in the wild?
We used to, a while ago, there used to be a few companies that was their whole business model, where they would take our binary and wrap it with their own stuff and distribute it. However, we don't like that, because you end up getting TunnelBear plus things that you never signed up for. So we try and stop these from going on. I'm not aware today of any, apart from with some QA testers, etc. I'm not aware of any distribution outside of the store and outside of Pescucha today.
Okay. And have you noticed?
Sorry. However, if you do notice it being distributed in other stores, I would love to hear about them. And just to make sure, that people are getting the latest update and things like that, we would definitely take a look at those.
See. And have you noticed instead that apps maybe on the stores branding as TunnelBear and pretending to be TunnelBear and
I think it has happened a few times, yes. But maybe they wouldn't call it. Maybe they might call it something else, or they would change the naming, etc. But usually those don't last too long.
Right. Yeah. That's some interesting stuff. So I'll remind you, we still have some more minutes for some questions. So I'll remind you, you can leave your questions in the Uni chat, in the pad, or in the Slack channel. I guess what I would ask you, which is a thing that I've been asking several other circumvention tool makers, is, we're here at the Internet Measurement Village. We have a great variety of projects that do network measurement, but also that do advocacy on internet censorship. So what I would ask you is basically, what can we as developers of network measurement tools or people that do research about internet censorship, what would you like from us? What is your wish list? What do you think are gaps in our current tools, methodologies that would improve and make the work that you do more effective? And in general, like if you have any wishes.
Great question. I didn't think you would ask me the question, but I'm joking. I think the first thing is just, and this includes ourselves. Okay, I'm not saying we should be doing this as well. More is publishing more research around the results that we see around censorship, and then two, just more communication and collaboration around the data. I know it's hard, specifically around private companies, etc., to share data. I know it's hard on our side too. I think, but if a framework or if a collaboration starts from scratch, that would be really interesting to get involved. And then yeah, I think that those two things are the main ones I would say. Specifically around collecting data in a privacy. I know different companies do it differently, but specifically around collecting data in a non-PI and a non-PI invasive way.
Shams, I don't know if you want to add something.
I'd agree about the point of collaboration. As I said before, we're all doing a lot of the same work, and I think collaboration is an important thing there to make sure we're all studying the most advanced stuff that we should be.
Yeah, those are some really great points. I think we definitely need to collaborate more, and I guess what used to be a great avenue for collaborations was these beautiful conferences that we would have in several places around the world. Unfortunately, in these times, we will probably have to renounce for some time to doing that sort of thing. But I would invite everybody to, join the Uni Slack channel, and perhaps we will do more of these remote internet measurement villages in the future.
Awesome.
So yeah, that's we'll see. So I see there's a question that is being typed down by Simone as we speak. I will read it, and perhaps I will be able to, and perhaps he will type even faster than I am reading. So does TunnelBear collect data useful to understand whether there is specific throttling of VPN connections?
So today, no. Actually, it's one of the, it's a hard problem to solve. And today, no, we don't. It is something we're looking into. So if anyone has any ideas or research papers out there, we're listening.
Yeah. The issue of throttling is definitely a tough one, and one that we're very much interested as well in solving or measuring. I guess another thing I will ask you is, what do you have like as asks to people that are like in the part of the broader internet freedom, internet measurement village community? Like what do you think people could do to get more involved in the work that TunnelBear is doing, or to support you, like beyond just us, techies, let's say, or developers or researchers, like more the general public? Like what's what is something that they could do? Do you have like some a shout out you would like to make, some requests, or anything?
Shams, any ideas on your side?
What I want to see more of. I guess amplifying each other's efforts would be really great. And I think, yeah, in the past few months, it's been very interesting for me as someone who isn't necessarily a technologist to see that this community is about more than just that. And it's actually like a really big human rights issue. So I guess amplifying these efforts to really communicate it as a rights-based issue, as well as an important technological hurdle. So I'd like to see more discussion around the human rights aspect of it, certainly.
Nice.
Mhm.
Great. Well, I think, I see Simone is following up with another question. Okay, let's see. So he's saying, do you have a sense of the future challenges you will be facing as a VPN that helps people circumvent censorship?
I think like I mentioned in the presentation, it's always going to be a cat and mouse game. I think one important issue that we're afraid of is when someone becomes in physical danger, if we put someone in physical danger because they're using a VPN. And I think today, we don't solve any of those problems. And if we do have to solve them anytime soon, I don't think it's going to be an easy problem. One is like, do we want to put in our hands that responsibility? And two is how do we solve them if we want to? So I think that's something that would definitely keep us awake if we were to think about it.
Interesting. I see there's a comment on the channel. Somebody mentioning in relation to the encrypted SNI question of whether or not encrypted SNI is being restricted or blocked inside of Iran, mentioning that it might be that TunnelBear has some data on this and could maybe be willing to share it. Like if you've maybe noticed increased rate of blocking of ESNI and something of that sort.
So today we have some data. However, we're not privy to share it yet. We're not ready to share it yet. But once we are ready to share it, we will. Yep.
Nice. Cool. So there's another question coming from. No, but this question was already asked. Have you noticed an increase in ESNI blocking? I think we're looping now. But no, I mean, there's a. I think this is perhaps one of the sessions that has gotten actually in the end the most number of questions. So I would really like to thank you again so much for taking the time to join us today, taking all these questions from
thank you for hosting.
From the Internet Measurement Village community. And I would also like to thank you really much for the important work that you folks are doing at TunnelBear.
Well, thank you so much, Arturo.
Thank you
so much for having us.
Thank you.
And for the kind words.
Yeah. Thank you so much for the kind words, and also thank you for the community for all the questions. It's been a pleasure. I do hope if anyone has any more questions that they want or thoughts, etc., please do not hesitate to reach out as well.
Nice. Great. Well, thanks for joining us again. I will also thank everybody from the internet for joining us today in this presentation. I will remind you that today we have actually another session coming up in just a few hours, exactly at 1700 UTC. It's from Kevin Bach, and it will be explaining the Geneva project and how they're developing this evolving censorship evasion system. So I invite you all to tune in again in just a couple of hours, actually. And yeah, we'll see you there. Bye.
All right.